Hi, I'm Charlotte Donlon, and this is Behind the Scenes with The Great Belonging, a companion video series. It sounds like something very markety, which I guess this is. So anyway, a companion video series for my book, The Great Belonging, How Loneliness Leads Us to Each Other. I'm going to talk about chapter 14, our 5 senses, and how our senses, the chapter is about how our senses help us navigate loneliness and belonging. And it's the last chapter of the first section of belonging to ourselves. So there are 14 chapters in that section. And then the next video will be the first video for the first chapter of section 2, which is belonging to each other. So I did a lot of research for this book, and only a little bit of the research I did made it into the book. And I tried to pick some of the more interesting things that people might not have thought about before, especially with regards to loneliness and belonging. And I just found some really great research and findings that had to do with how our senses help us belong. So that is what this chapter is about. I include some research, obviously, and then some ways I experience loneliness and belonging that are kind of connected to my senses. And I close with an image or a scene or a example, I guess you would say, using my children and one of their kind of sensory experiences that I think helps them experience belonging. I need to ask them, actually, if what I write about in that chapter is true. I think it is. In fact, I'm pretty sure I talked to them about it. It's just been so long. I mean, I wrote the book about 3 years ago, and a lot's happened since then, and with pandemic brain and pandemic life, it's just harder to remember things these days. So I do want to also talk a little bit about how different chapters found their way into the sections that they're in. I'm actually meeting with a writing client once a week. He's local here in Birmingham, and he's getting overwhelmed with like how the book he wants to write is structured, which is fun. Like, that's a good thing for us to think about, but I didn't worry about that until after I'd already started writing, because I have to kind of write my way into things. And I want to say I talked about this on Twitter with KJ Ramsey and a couple other people in a Twitter thread. I forget who asked the question, the initial question, but I saw KJ reply to it and then I replied. But anyway, I don't outline things, at least not in the beginning. And then when I do kind of use a quote outline, it's more of just a list of things that, like, in order, or maybe not even in order. But what I did for this book was I just wrote about loneliness and belonging. I just wrote a bunch of stuff, which I felt like was necessary because I needed to figure out where I was going to land with it. And so once I had several chapters, I spread them all out at this bar in Santa Fe, spread them all out and put them into piles and tried to find some themes that connected different chapters. And I landed on one structure that is not the structure now. I can't even remember what it was, to be honest. I think it was topical, chapters about X, chapters about Y, chapters about Z, and then more topical, although these, the sections of belonging are topics, obviously, but it was more concrete topics. And then I started thinking more about belonging, and what it looks like to belong and the different ways we belong, and realize that the chapters fit into these 5 categories pretty well. And you know, some of the chapters could fit into multiple categories. So you know, if a chapter could fit in more than one, it came down to like the flow of the book and the direction of the narrative, and like where I was starting from and where I wanted to land. So I told my client, like, don't worry about it, just keep writing and we'll worry about the structure later. And I know some writers might like figure out the structure at the very beginning, and that's fine. Like, I think even with my second book, I'm pretty sure of what the structure is going to be. So my chapters might be more on target from the beginning, instead of like for The Great Belonging, I feel like I wrote 3 or 4 different books because I pulled a bunch of chapters and like threw them out. And then I had to, like, once I had the different sections, I needed to fill in some holes and write more. So, you know, I might have to do the same thing with my next book, but if I kind of know what my structure is going to be from the beginning, I might not have to write so much that's not used. But again, I've said this elsewhere, like, writing things that aren't used, it's not a waste. It's not a waste of our time, energy, whatever, because sometimes we need to write certain things to be able to write the next thing. So let's say I threw away 3 chapters that were in the belonging, or let's just say I threw away 3 chapters. Maybe I wouldn't have been able to write this chapter about our senses if I hadn't written those other chapters, or maybe I wouldn't have begun to explore the research about our senses if I hadn't read those chapters that got tossed. So I just firmly believe that the writing process includes the whole process, and that the whole process is valuable, even if we write things that aren't used, even if we, you know, write things that our editors toss out at some point. It's not wasted time, and it's not wasted effort. So that makes me feel better about the writing process, and, you know, what I offer, or what I give my attention and time to as I write and as I'm working on a larger project like a book. All right, thanks so much for joining me for Behind the Scenes with The Great Belonging. And as I said last time, if you have questions or comments, please email me at charlotte@charlottedonlon.com. I think I'm going to do a Q&A video, or a few different ones that will be a part of this series. So yeah, reach out to me, charlotte@charlottedonlon.com. You can also learn more about me and my work and my other writing at charlottedonlon.com, and you can learn about my spiritual direction for writers offerings and my podcast on faith and writing and art and faith at ourfaithandwriting.com. Those links should be easily accessible wherever you're watching this video. All right, thanks so much.